Joe Burrow was speaking recently about the recovery from his injury. He spoke about this with the media and said, well, listen, I mean, he's getting there, but he's still got a ways to go.
I'm still not quite throwing it the way that I would like. I'm making good decisions. I'm putting the ball where I want to. I still think there's another level of improvement that I can get to coming back from injury on ball location and spin rate and all that. So that's going to continue to get better as I get healthier. And so there's always another level to find.
So Joe Burrow discussing his recovery from injury.
I mean, yeah, I got to be honest. I don't know that it's ever going to be what it was. The truth of the matter is when you go through injuries, and LaVar, you can obviously speak to this too, your body changes and you kind of just adapt to a new normal. I always, kind of question and wonder when people are like, oh, it's going to, feel like this after such a long period of time. I'm like, well, is it going to feel like that because my body's adapted to whatever that new normal is and how it feels? I fractured my right index finger my second year in the league, and they had to put pins in. And they had to stay in for 6 weeks, so they cast it. They put these pins in, and then eventually they take the cast off, and they take the pins out, and then you start literally rehabbing my right index finger. I mean, the problem with it is I tried to play the following week, so it kind of distorted how much they could really do to kind of make my finger back to what it was before I broke it and tore off these tendons and ligaments. And the issue with that is it was never going to be the same and how it felt. And it doesn't sound like a big issue because it's a right index finger, but when you're right-handed and you throw the football, that's the very last thing that touches the football. You go ask, any pitcher, we've seen pitchers go on the IR or IL for a hangnail. Like anything that has to do with that throwing hand or that right arm is incredibly valuable. And to this day, I still don't have feeling in my right index finger, the tip of it. It never felt the same after pulling the pins out and rehabbing it and trying to throw again. And I'm not saying that has anything to do with it. You just got to adapt to a new normal. That's how the game's played. But that's the challenge for Joe Burrow is however that wrist feels, however his throwing motion feels, he's got to keep working and finding a way of getting to his maximum ceiling and trying to stay there as much as he can, despite the fact that he's going to have to deal with this the rest of his career.
Listen, injuries can always it does change things, and it does complicate things. It also brings you to the realization that you only have so much, you only have so much time. And it's crazy because whether you're in your first year or your second year, if you sustain one of those injuries that brings you to that realization, you still have to come to the same conclusion. Ultimately, you have to approach each day, each practice, each game like it could be your last. And that was kind of something that in my mind, I said it during the years that I played, like, oh, high school ball. The coaches say it to you in high school. They say it to you in Little League, actually. I heard coaches say, win the day. You might not have the next, you might get hurt. You might not have this next practice to work hard, take advantage of what you got. Same thing in high school, same thing in college. But I never really believed it. You never really believe that something's going to alter, what it is that you have going on. I wouldn't have thought that, my career would have been derailed by injury. Like I heard so many guys say it. And for the longest time, I'd be like, man, you're a loser. I don't care if you're a future Hall of Famer. I don't care what you are. Like if you start attributing why everything went wrong to an injury, like golly, like bruh, like take a bow and get the hell out of the way. Like that's kind of like always was my mentality until I got hurt. Then I became one of them dudes. I was like, damn, I'm really hurt. Like, and this ain't going to change. And I do have to figure out what my new normal is. And I do have to try to strategize on what I do. Man, my last 2 years in the National Football League, bro, I went into the facility probably like at least 2 hours before you were actually supposed to start like matriculating in, just so that I could do my whole prehab and rehab, routines, contrasting, from stem to specified lifts in the gym, you name it. I was doing it, and I still blew my ass out. My Achilles tendon still went. It still ruptured. Right. All of the stretching board, everything that they did, preventative, you name it, it still popped. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much that applies to Joe Burrow and his situation, but that the whole idea of understanding or coming to the realization that, something that you've altered isn't ever going to be what it once was, that's a sobering moment, man. If you really have that true moment, it's a sobering moment. So
the sobering moment for him has to be the fact that, this is year 5 for him in the NFL. And if you go through his journey, I mean, the reason why he ended up at LSU is in some parts attributed to him injuring, I believe, his throwing hand in the spring, and he couldn't, fully participate and compete the way he wanted to. And so then that kind of led to him then going to LSU, and thank God he was able to be healthy for those final 2 years, because that made the difference in everything. I mean, he went from, a guy who was kind of forgotten about to, in his first year, play some really good football in the second half of the season at LSU, and then literally having what I would still to this day define as the greatest singular season in college football history for a quarterback. I mean, that offense was unbelievable, and he was unbelievable. I mean, the way they won the national championship, the Heisman, everything, I mean, it was one of the most amazing stories and performances that I had seen. I didn't know if a quarterback could play at that high of a level for the entirety of a season like that through the playoff and everything. And he did it. And he eventually becomes the number 1 overall pick. But then those injuries keep resurfacing, now in Cincinnati. And it's unfortunate, but he's got to find it. He's got to find a way of overcoming that and adapting to a new normal. It's no different than when you're playing with an injury. You got to go out there and figure out what you have, what you don't have. And, almost like a pitcher on the mound. Like some days you're not going to have some of those off-speed pitches. Maybe your location's not quite as good. Well, you're starting today. So you got to figure out how to work around that. And you have to figure out how to still get those guys out. Maybe it's not strikeouts, maybe it's groundouts, maybe it's flyouts, whatever the case is. That's the mentality. It's tough to deal with, but that's what you're tasked with when you're a quarterback. So I'm hoping we get to see more of what we saw this past week, because he truly can be one of the best in the game. And as far as the people who are tired of seeing the Kansas City Chiefs dominate the AFC, well, outside of Josh Allen, outside of Lamar Jackson, outside of maybe C.J. Stroud, who I think will be challenging, them in the future, it's Joe Burrow. Burrow's been that next quarterback that's been as good as anyone at challenging the Chiefs for trying to, not allow them to keep having their way through what I still think is, the better conference, the more difficult path.
I mean, there's been 2 quarterbacks that have beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, Joe Burrow and Tom Brady. Tom Brady's calling games. Joe Burrow's coming back from this injury. So, and I would also say, wouldn't you agree?
Joe Burrow and those guys that we're naming don't play against Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
You got to have a defense. And the one thing that Patrick Mahomes has had is defense. He's had Spags. He's had a defense of units that have really, really complemented their offense so well.
I mean, their defense has been better than their offense recently.
And that's what, to me, at times, that's the separation. When you look at what's taking place with Cincinnati right now, that's an Achilles heel for them.
Yeah. He's despite the fact we're having this conversation, he is playing.
He's playing well.
He is.
Yes.
Burrow's not playing bad this year by any means.
That's what I'm saying. So it's kind of hard to look at the fact that he is playing well. He is playing well. It's not like he's playing subpar football. He's playing.
Let's say he stays on the streak. He's up for the MVP. Now the only problem is we tend to only give the MVP to players who have a winning record or are there in the playoff hunt. And that's the problem, is they're a 1-4 football team, but he's completing over 72% of his passes. He's tied or leading the league in touchdown passes, I believe. He's only thrown 2 picks. He's already at 1,300 yards, almost 1,200 yards, or 1,400 yards, excuse me. I mean, he's going to be on pace to have some of the best stats of anyone in the NFL this year at the quarterback spot. So then it just comes down to where's this team at when it's all said and done, at least for the individual accolades. Yeah,
I just think it's hard to overcome if you don't have the balance, right? If something like, for instance, we generally don't talk about special teams unless, something bad happens, right? But we didn't even bring up in the conversation about the Seattle game. It was special teams that kind of was the catalyst for Seattle actually having an opportunity to try to win the game. You know what I mean? So you're talking about 3 phases. You got to win 2 phases, they say, out of the 3 to be able to win a game. So even if you have the dopest quarterback ever in life, if you don't win special teams or defense, one of those 2 to give you the 2 out of the 3, you're generally not going to win a game in the National Football League or in college. Hell, or at any level. You got to win 2 out of the 3. And that's what they say. I believe in that. I've subscribed to that. And, Joe Burrow doesn't have that right now.
Well, listen, all I know is if he keeps playing the way he's playing, apologies to Sam Darnold. It's been fun. You can go ahead and step back off Comeback Player of the Year. All right, that'll be Joe Burrow's award. And that means if Joe Burrow continues to keep playing the way he's playing, my Super Bowl pick is still alive and well. Right,
hey, man, that's where you at right now?
Yeah. Oh, you talking about
that's where you at right now? That's your current situation?
Yeah. That's what I got going on here, man.
Hell yeah.
Dang.
Hell yeah.
Dang. Looks desolate.
Yeah, it's lonely, man.
Dang.